The morning frost clung to the window panes of Oak Ridge Elementary like delicate lace, beautiful yet foreboding. Sarah Miller stared out at the gathering snow clouds, pulling her threadbare cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The classroom was empty, her students long gone for the day, but the silence felt heavier than usual. 3 months as Oak Ridge's newest teacher, and she was still an outsider, the strange widow from back east who spoke too properly and asked too many questions. "You're going to freeze to death if you don't fix that roof before the storm hits," Principal Gladys Warren announced from the doorway, not bothering to soften her blunt assessment. Sarah forced a smile. "I've inquired with Mr. Harrington about repairs, but he seems reluctant to help." "Course he is. You refuse to let that boy of his cheat on his arithmetic. Harrington men hold grudges like they're family heirlooms." Gladys shook her head. "This town doesn't take kindly to change, Mrs. Miller, or to people who don't know their place. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Sarah gathered her papers, mind churning over the impossible arithmetic of her situation. Her teaching salary barely covered food, her tiny cabin was falling apart, and the townspeople treated her like a disease they might catch. Only her students, the bright, curious children untainted by their parents' prejudices, gave her any hope at all. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the first snowflakes of what promised to be a brutal night. Sarah hurried toward home, chin tucked against the cold. She passed Carson's general store, where Mrs. Carson ostentatiously turned her back. The women of Oak Ridge had decided Sarah was either too pretty or too educated, possibly both, and therefore dangerous. "Look at her, rushing home to that sad little shack," someone whispered loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "Guess she's not finding a husband to rescue her any time soon." Sarah quickened her pace. After losing Thomas to influenza just 8 months into their marriage, she'd come west hoping to outrun her grief. Instead, she'd found this remote mountain town, seemingly frozen in time and suspicion, where her status as an educated widow made her somehow threatening. Her cabin came into view, a small, crooked structure at the edge of town that nobody else had wanted. The roof sagged dangerously over the porch, where fresh snow was already accumulating. As Sarah approached, she noticed something strange, smoke rising from her chimney. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she hesitated at her own front door. Had some traveler broken in? A wild animal? When Thomas died, she'd promised herself she wouldn't live in fear, so she took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The warmth hit her first, then the smell of wood smoke and something cooking. A man stood with his back to her, impossibly large in her tiny kitchen. He turned slowly, and Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She recognized him immediately, though she'd never spoken to him. Everyone called him the Mountain Man, a massive, silent figure who appeared in town a few times a year to trade furs and game before disappearing back into the wilderness. Children whispered that he was part bear, and adults crossed to the other side of the street when he passed. "What are you doing in my home?" Sarah asked, voice steadier than she felt. He didn't answer. Some said he couldn't speak at all, but pointed toward her ceiling. Sarah looked up to see that the water stain that had been spreading for weeks was gone. He'd fixed her roof. "You repaired it? Why?" The mountain man moved toward the door, forcing Sarah to step aside. Up close, he was even more imposing, bearded, weathered, with eyes the color of winter sky. He paused beside her, then placed something on her table. A rabbit, already skinned and dressed for cooking. Before Sarah could thank him, he was gone, leaving only footprints in the snow. That night, as the promised storm howled around her secure cabin, Sarah ate better than she had in months and tried to make sense of the mountain man's unexpected kindness. She'd done nothing to earn his help, had never even spoken to him. Yet he'd seen her need and responded without wanting anything in return, something no one else in Oak Ridge had done. Morning brought 3 feet of snow and the realization that she might not make it to the schoolhouse. As Sarah contemplated the impossible trek, a sound outside drew her to the window. There stood the mountain man, clearing a path from her door with a handmade snow shovel. When he finished, she opened the door. "Thank you," she said simply. "I don't even know your name." He reached into his coat and pulled out a worn leather pouch, extracting a folded piece of paper that he handed to her. On it, in surprisingly elegant handwriting, was written, "Ethan Ward." "Ethan," Sarah repeated, the name somehow fitting this silent giant. "I'm Sarah Miller." He nodded once, as if to say he already knew, then turned to leave. "Wait," Sarah called, surprising herself. Would you like some coffee before you go?" Ethan hesitated, looking back at her with an expression of such guarded hope that it made her heart twist. Then, removing his fur hat, he nodded and followed her inside. It was the beginning of something neither of them could have anticipated. Each morning that week, Ethan appeared to clear her path, and each morning Sarah invited him in for coffee. He never spoke, but he listened intently as she filled the silence, telling him about her students, about Thomas, about the books she loved. Sometimes he'd write short responses on scraps of paper, and Sarah discovered he was far more educated than the townspeople assumed. On Friday morning, Sarah opened her door to find not just Ethan, but also 3 of her students trudging through. Her cleared path. "Mrs. Miller," little Emma Peterson called. "Mama says school's cancelled 'cause of the snow, but we wanted to know if you'd still teach us today. We can come to your cabin." Behind them, Ethan was already retreating, no doubt wanting to avoid being seen by the children. "Of course I'll teach you," Sarah replied, then called to Ethan's retreating back. "And Mr. Ward is welcome to join us, if he'd like." The children turned, eyes widening at the mention of the mountain man, whose reputation had reached mythic proportions in their young minds. "Is he really part bear?" whispered Jacob Harrington, son of the very man who'd refused to fix her roof. "He's a man, Jacob, a good, kind man who helped me when no one else would." To everyone's surprise, Ethan stopped and slowly turned back. When the children didn't run screaming, he cautiously approached, keeping a respectful distance. That day, as Sarah taught an impromptu class in her tiny cabin, Ethan sat silently in the corner. The children, initially terrified, soon forgot their fear as Sarah guided them through their lessons. Occasionally, she'd glance at Ethan and catch him watching her with an expression that made her cheeks warm. When the lesson ended and the children prepared to leave, Jacob lingered. "Mrs. Miller," he said hesitantly, "my pa says you're stuck up 'cause you won't let me copy answers. But you're not stuck up at all. You're nice." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Thank you, Jacob," Sarah replied, touched by the boy's candor. "And please tell your father that I believe you're smart enough to do your own work." After the children left, Ethan remained, his massive frame somehow making her small cabin feel safer rather than crowded. He pulled out his paper and wrote, "You are a good teacher." "Thank you," Sarah said, touched by the simple compliment. "But I'm afraid the town doesn't agree. They want someone who'll maintain the status quo, not challenge their children to think." Ethan, who wrote again, this time longer. "Town has always feared what they don't understand. They don't understand you, or me." The truth of his words struck her. "Why do you stay near Oak Ridge if they treat you this way?" His response was slow in coming. "My father's land is in these mountains. It's home." That evening, instead of leaving, at dusk, as he usually did, Ethan built up her fire and wrote that the storm was worsening. He would sleep on her porch to ensure she was safe. Something in his manner, respectful but determined, told Sarah it would be pointless to argue. Morning brought the discovery that Ethan had not, in fact, slept on her porch, but had instead spent the night keeping her fire fed from outside, leaving fresh tracks in the snow. The gesture moved her deeply, his determination to help without compromising her reputation, though there was no one for miles to see. Over the following weeks, as winter tightened its grip on Oakridge, Ethan became Sarah's silent guardian. He appeared like clockwork each morning to clear her path and walk her to school, vanishing before the other teachers or students arrived. He repaired her broken furniture, stocked her woodpile, and occasionally left fresh game at her doorstep. The townspeople noticed, of course. Whispers followed Sarah everywhere. "Living in sin with that wild man," Mrs. Carson told anyone who would listen. "My Jacob says the mountain man sits in her class sometimes," Mr. Harrington added, though his son had begged him not to tell. Principal Warren called Sarah into her office. "The school board has concerns," she said without preamble, "about your association with that mountain savage." "Mr. Ward," Sarah corrected firmly, "has shown me more kindness than anyone in this town. He's educated, respectful, and has never once made me feel unsafe." "Be that as it may," Gladys continued, "appearances matter in a teacher's position. If this continues, I'm afraid the board may have to reconsider your employment." That night, when Ethan appeared with firewood, Sarah told him about the warning. "They're going to take away the only thing that gives my life meaning," she said, tears escaping, despite her efforts to remain composed. Ethan's face darkened. He wrote quickly, "I will stay away. You need your work." "No," Sarah protested, surprising herself with her vehemence. "That's not right. Why should I have to choose between your friendship and my job? You've done nothing wrong." But Ethan was adamant. With painful care he wrote, "You came here for a new start. I won't be the reason you lose it." For 3 days, Ethan didn't appear. Sarah's path remained snowed in. Her woodpile dwindled, and a terrible emptiness settled in her chest. She'd lost Thomas, and now she was losing the unexpected friendship that had somehow begun to heal her heart. On the 4th day, as Sarah struggled through the snow towards school, her path was suddenly blocked by Mr. Harrington and several other men from town. "Mrs. Miller," Harrington said, his tone falsely pleasant, "we think it's time you understood how things work in Oakridge." Sarah looked from face to face, seeing only cold determination. "I'm just trying to teach your children," she said. "You're trying to change them," another man corrected, filling their heads with ideas about equality and women's suffrage, making them question the natural order, and consorting with that mountain devil, added a third. "Mr. Ward is a better man than any of you," Sarah replied, anger overcoming her fear. "He helps those in need without asking for anything in return. He doesn't judge or threaten." Harrington stepped closer. "We've decided you're not a good fit for Oakridge, Mrs. Miller. You have until the end of the week to leave town, and if I refuse," Sarah asked, though her voice trembled. "Then we can't guarantee your safety," Harrington said simply. "Accidents happen in harsh winters, especially to women living alone." As if summoned by the threat, a massive figure emerged from the trees behind the men. Ethan stood like an avenging spirit, his face thunderous, his presence suddenly terrifying. Men turned, several stepping back involuntarily. "This doesn't concern you," Harrington said, though his voice had lost its authority. For the first time since Sarah had known him, Ethan spoke. His voice was rough from disuse, but clear and deep. As he said just 6 words, "She is not leaving, I am staying." The men's faces paled at Ethan's unexpected words. His voice, powerful from years of mountain silence, seemed to echo through the snow-laden trees. Harrington took an instinctive step backward, his confidence visibly crumbling. You can talk," he stammered, as if this revelation was more shocking than Ethan's threat. Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself between Sarah and the men. "When necessary." One of the men, the blacksmith's son, tugged nervously at Harrington's sleeve. "Let's go, Thomas. This ain't worth it." But Harrington's pride wouldn't allow him to retreat so easily. "The town council won't stand for this," he warned, voice pitched higher than normal. "She's corrupting our children, and she's educating them," Ethan cut in, each word deliberate and sharp. "Something you fear because educated children might question their ignorant fathers." Harrington's face flushed crimson. For a moment Sarah thought he might lunge at Ethan, but self-preservation prevailed. With a final glare at Sarah, he turned and trudged away through the snow, his companions following quickly. Only when they disappeared around the bend did Sarah release the breath she'd been holding. "You spoke," she whispered, staring up at Ethan, with wonder. "Why now? After all this time?" Ethan's weathered face softened as he looked down at her. "Some things worth breaking silence for." A warmth bloomed in Sarah's chest, despite the biting cold. "They'll be back," she said, "with more men." "I know." Ethan hesitated, then added, "Come to my cabin, until it's safe." Sarah hesitated, knowing such a move would destroy what remained of her reputation, but the alternative was staying alone, vulnerable to whatever accident Harrington and his men might arrange. "My students," she said finally. "I can't abandon them." Ethan considered this, his brow furrowed in thought. Then he nodded once, decisively. "I'll take you to school. Wait in forest. Bring you home after." "That's your solution? To be my bodyguard?" Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling at his straightforward approach. "For now," he replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Have better plans soon." True to his word, Ethan escorted Sarah to the schoolhouse, disappearing into the tree line before any students arrived. Throughout the day, she felt his protective presence nearby, a comfort, as she faced the hostile stares of parents who'd clearly heard about the morning's confrontation. Only little Jacob Harrington showed her any kindness, slipping a crude drawing onto her desk when his classmates weren't looking. It showed a tall man and a smaller woman standing together against what appeared to be a crowd of angry stick figures. At the bottom, in careful letters, "Don't be scared, Mrs. Miller." Sarah carefully folded the drawing into her pocket, heart aching for this gentle boy born to such a cruel father. When the school day ended, Sarah found Ethan waiting just beyond the tree line, as promised. "Jacob Harrington gave me this," she said, showing him the drawing. "Not everyone in this town has closed their mind." Ethan studied the child's artwork, his expression softening. "Children see truth," he said simply. As they walked toward her cabin, Ethan suddenly stiffened. He gripped Sarah's arm, pulling her to a stop. "Smoke," he said tersely. "Too much smoke." Sarah followed his gaze and gasped. Black smoke billowed from the direction of her small cabin. Without a word, they broke into a run, Sarah's heart hammering against her ribs. They were too late. Flames engulfed the tiny structure, the heat hitting them like a wall as they approached. Sarah watched in horror as everything she owned, the books she'd treasured, Thomas's letters, her mother's silver hand mirror, crackled and disappeared into the inferno. "Who would—" she began, but the question died on her lips. They both knew who was responsible. Ethan's face hardened into something dangerous. "Get behind me," he growled, drawing Sarah back. From around the burning cabin stepped Harrington and 5 other men, their expressions grim and determined. 2 carried rifles. "Tragic accident," Harrington called over the roar of the flames. "Chimney fire. Could happen to anyone." Ethan moved so quickly that Sarah barely registered what happened. In 3 long strides, he reached Harrington, lifting the smaller man by his coat lapels until his feet dangled above the snow. "Give me one reason," Ethan growled. "Not to throw you into those flames." The color drained from Harrington's face. "Kill me, and they'll hang you!" he gasped, gesturing weakly toward the men with rifles. "Stop!" Sarah shouted, rushing forward to grab Ethan's arm. "This isn't the way!" For a terrible moment she thought Ethan might ignore her, might actually throw Harrington into the fire. Then, with visible effort, he released his grip, letting the man crumple into the snow. "You're right," Ethan told her quietly. "Not worth becoming like them." Harrington scrambled backward, his previous bravado evaporated. "This changes nothing," he spat, though his voice trembled. "You've got nowhere to live now, Mrs. Miller. No possessions, nothing. You'll be gone by morning if you know what's good. For you." Before Sarah could respond, another voice cut through the tense standoff. "What in God's name is happening here?" Everyone turned to see Principal Warren approaching, her expression thunderous as she surveyed the burning cabin and the assembled men. "Thomas Harrington!" she snapped. "Did you do this?" Harrington attempted to regain his composure. "Now, Gladys, this was clearly an accident." "Save your lies," she cut him off, then turned to Sarah. "My brother sent a telegram from the school board in Carson City. They've been asking about you, about why a teacher with your credentials would bury herself in a backwater like Oak Ridge." She paused, looking pointedly at the burning cabin. "Now I see." "Gladys," one of the other men began, "you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "I understand that while I've been trying to build a respectable school, you men have been terrorizing my best teacher because she dared to expect more from your children than rote memorization." Sarah stared at Gladys in shock. All this time, she'd thought the principal was part of the campaign against her. "The school board wants to interview you, Mrs. Miller," Gladys continued. "They're expanding the Carson City School and need someone with experience teaching advanced curriculum." She glanced at the burning cabin. "Though it seems you might be delayed in accepting their offer." Harrington pushed himself to his feet, brushing snow from his clothes. "This isn't your concern, Gladys. The town council can explain to the state authorities why they allowed a school teacher's home to be burned down," Gladys shot back. "I'm sure they'll be very interested. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The men exchanged uneasy glances. Threats from Ethan were one thing. He was an outsider, easily painted as dangerous. But Gladys Warren came from one of the oldest families in the territory. Her brother sat on the state education board. Her word carried weight. "This isn't over," Harrington muttered, but the fight had gone out of him. He gestured to his companions, and they trudged away through the snow, leaving Sarah, Ethan, and Gladys standing before the burning ruin. When they were gone, Gladys turned to Sarah. "You can stay with me tonight, Mrs. Miller. Tomorrow we'll sort this out." "Thank you," Sarah said, still struggling to process everything that had happened. "But why now? Why help me after allowing them to harass me for months?" Gladys had the grace to look ashamed. "Fear makes cowards of most of us," she admitted. "I told myself staying neutral was best for the school. I was wrong." Her eyes shifted to Ethan. Unlike some, who found their courage when it mattered most, Ethan acknowledged her words with a slight nod. "We should go," Gladys said, eyeing the darkening sky. "Nothing to be salvaged here." Sarah stared at the flames consuming what little she had left in the world. "I need a moment," she said quietly. Gladys nodded in understanding. "I'll wait on the road." When they were alone, Sarah turned to Ethan, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Everything's gone," she whispered. "Every memory, every letter, everything I brought from my life before." Ethan's large hand gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "Not everything," he said softly. "Not your spirit, not your mind." The simple truth of his words pierced straight to her heart. Standing amid the ruins of her life for the second time, first losing Thomas, now this, Sarah found unexpected strength in Ethan's steady presence. "Carson City," she said, testing the idea aloud. "It would be a fresh start. Again." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Was it pain? Better opportunity, he agreed, his voice carefully neutral. Better life. Sarah suddenly realized what he was thinking, that she would leave, that this connection between them would be severed just as it had begun to deepen. Before she could speak, he added, I will escort you there. Ensure safe arrival. Ethan should go, he interrupted, nodding toward where Gladys waited. Storm coming soon? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That night, in Gladys Warren's spare bedroom, Sarah lay awake, wrestling with her future. Carson City offered safety, stability, proper housing, and respect for her profession. All the things Oak Ridge had denied her, yet the thought of leaving filled her with unexpected sorrow. She pictured Ethan returning to his solitary existence, in the mountains, silent once more without her to speak to. She thought of little Jacob Harrington, who defended her with a child's drawing. Even this harsh landscape had worked its way into her heart, the snow-capped peaks and whispering pines becoming familiar in a way the crowded eastern cities never had. Morning brought clarity in the form of Ethan himself, appearing on Gladys's doorstep at dawn. The principal answered his knock, eyebrows raised at finding the mountain man on her porch. He wants to speak with you, she told Sarah, a glint of something like approval in her eyes. Sarah followed her to the door. Ethan stood awkwardly on the porch, hat in his massive hands. Something about him was different. He'd trimmed his beard, combed his hair. He wore a clean shirt beneath his fur coat. Walk with me, he asked, the words still sounding strange in his deep voice. They strolled in silence through the awakening town. Curtains twitched as they passed, but Ethan seemed oblivious to the stares. Finally he spoke. Been thinking all night. Sarah waited patiently as he searched for words. After months of written notes, verbal communication clearly didn't come easily to him. Carson City is good opportunity, he continued. But, she prompted, when he fell silent. Ethan stopped walking, turning to face her fully. But I would miss you, he said simply. The confession, so direct and unadorned, took Sarah's breath away. Before she could respond, he continued, words coming faster now, as if he feared losing courage. I have land, good land, cabin larger than yours was, solid, built it myself, stream nearby, game plenty. Sarah's heart began to race as she realized what he was trying to say. Children need teacher here too, he added, not just in Carson City. Ethan, Sarah said gently, are you asking me to stay? He shook his head. Asking more. He took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and withdrew something small that glinted in the morning light. A ring, crude but beautiful, shaped from what appeared to be silver and set with a small mountain stone. Made this last night. His eyes met hers, vulnerability and determination battling in their blue depths. Marry me. Sarah stared at the ring, thoughts whirling. We barely know each other, she whispered. Known you since first day you arrived, Ethan replied. Watched. You stand tall against cruelty, teach children who needed you, brighten this dark place, but marriage so quickly. Even as she protested, Sarah felt something inevitable unfolding between them, like a story written long before either of them knew its ending. Not offering perfect life, Ethan acknowledged. Offering partnership, protection, promise to respect. Your mind, your teaching. A hint of a smile touched his lips, and promising to speak, more than before. Sarah couldn't help but laugh at that, the sound ringing clear in the morning air. That would be quite a change. His expression grew serious again. Would build you schoolroom on my land. Children could come there, away from town's poison. The image formed in Sarah's mind, a small schoolhouse nestled among the pines. Children, learning without the weight of their parents' prejudices. Her own classroom, to teach as she saw fit, and Ethan beside her. This quiet, thoughtful man who had risked everything to protect her, who saw her worth when the town saw only an outsider. To be driven away. People will talk, she said, though she was running out of objections. People always talk, Ethan replied with unexpected wisdom. Let them. We'll be too busy living. A week ago, such a proposal would have seemed absurd. But standing amid the ruins of her old life, Sarah found herself imagining this new path with surprising clarity. Yes, she said, the word escaping before her mind could catch up to her heart. Ethan's eyes widened, as if he hadn't dared to hope for acceptance. Yes? Sarah nodded, a smile spreading across her face. Yes, I'll marry you, Ethan Ward. His hand trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if he'd measured in some secret way during those quiet mornings over coffee. When? He asked, practical even in this emotional moment. Sarah thought of Harrington and his threats, of her burned cabin, of the opportunity slipping away in Carson City. Soon, she decided, very soon. They continued walking, Ethan's hand tentatively finding hers, engulfing it in warmth. As they rounded the corner near the general store, they came face to face with Mrs. Carson herself, who stopped short at the sight of them. Her eyes dropped to their clasped hands, then to the ring on Sarah's finger. For once, the gossipy woman seemed speechless. Sarah lifted her chin. Good morning, Mrs. Carson. Lovely day, isn't it? Without waiting for a response, they walked past, Sarah feeling a strange new confidence in each step. Behind them, Mrs. Carson stood frozen, no doubt already planning how quickly she could spread this shocking news throughout Oakridge. That was brave, Ethan observed, the hint of admiration in his voice warming Sarah more than any fire could. I learned from you, she replied. Sometimes silence isn't the answer. Sometimes you need to speak your truth, even to those who don't want to hear it. Ethan's rare, full smile transformed his face. Quick learner, by noon, the entire town knew of their engagement. By evening, Gladys Warren had offered to host the ceremony at the schoolhouse, the one place in Oakridge where Sarah had found any happiness. It won't be an easy road, Gladys warned as she helped Sarah prepare for bed that night. The town won't forget this quickly. I'm not marrying the town, Sarah replied, surprised by her own certainty. I'm marrying Ethan, Gladys studied her thoughtfully. You know, when you first arrived, I thought you were too soft for frontier life, too refined, too educated. She smiled ruefully. I've never been more wrong about anyone. Sarah touched the crude ring on her finger, feeling its weight like a promise. Neither have I, she admitted. About myself, about Ethan, about what I need to be happy. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the schoolhouse she'd come to love, wearing Gladys's best dress and holding a bouquet of winter holly Ethan had gathered from the mountainside. The room was nearly empty, just Gladys, the circuit preacher, and to everyone's surprise, little Jacob Harrington, who had slipped away from home to witness the union. Outside, a small crowd of townspeople had gathered, not to celebrate, but to gawk at the scandalous union of the widowed teacher and the wild mountain man. Their whispers carried through the thin walls, but Sarah barely heard them. Ethan waited for her at the front of the room, almost unrecognizable in clean clothes, his hair neatly combed, his beard trimmed close. But his eyes, those clear blue eyes that had first caught her attention, remained unchanged, watching her approach with a mixture of awe and tenderness that made her heart swell. The ceremony was brief, Ethan's responses coming in short, clear statements that nevertheless filled the room with their sincerity. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah felt not the desperate grief she'd expected, the sense of betraying Thomas's memory, but instead a quiet certainty that this was right, that life was offering her not a replacement for what she'd lost, but something entirely new. As they stepped outside to face the assembled crowd, Sarah braced herself for more hostility. Instead, an unexpected figure pushed through to the front. Mr. Harrington, red-faced and clearly agitated, dragged Jacob by the arm. "This," he sputtered, pointing at his son, "is your fault, filling his head with nonsense. Now he says he wants to keep learning, even if he has to hike to the mountains to do it." Ethan stepped forward, but Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm. This was her battle. "Your son," she said clearly, ensuring everyone present could hear, "is exceptionally bright, Mr. Harrington. He deserves an education that challenges him, that helps him become more than—" She paused, choosing her words carefully, "more than his circumstances might otherwise allow." "We're leaving," Harrington snapped, tugging at Jacob's arm. But the boy resisted, looking up at Sarah with desperate hope. "Please," Jacob said, his small voice somehow carrying across the tense silence. "Please keep teaching me, Mrs.—" He stumbled, then corrected himself. "Mrs. Ward." The name, spoken for the first time, sent a shiver of something like belonging through Sarah's heart. She knelt to Jacob's level, ignoring his father's glare. "I will always be your teacher, Jacob," she promised. "My door will always be open to any child who wants to learn." Ethan's hand came to rest on her shoulder, steady and supportive. "Our door," he corrected quietly. "Our school." As they walked away from the town that had rejected them, toward the mountains and the life they would build together, Sarah felt the weight of the past, both distant and recent, beginning to lift. Ahead lay uncertainty, challenges, and no doubt continued resistance from Oakridge, but also possibility, purpose, a chance to create something meaningful from the broken pieces life had handed her. "Happy?" Ethan asked as they crested the first hill, Oakridge falling away behind them. Sarah looked back at the town one last time, then up at the man who had chosen to break his silence for her. "Getting there," she answered honestly. "With you." His smile, still rare, still precious, was all the response she needed as they continued climbing, step by steady step, toward home. After Gladys departed, Sarah and Ethan stood together, watching the children emerge from hiding, returning to the schoolhouse with relieved chatter. The confrontation had shaken them, but children are resilient. Already their focus shifted to the day's lessons, the excitement of learning overshadowing fear. "They're brave," Ethan observed, his voice holding a note of pride. "They learned from you," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. "We all did." Ethan shook his head. "From each other." He looked down at her, his expression softening. "You've brought life here, to this mountain, to me." The simple admission warmed Sarah more than any elaborate declaration could have. In the months since their hasty wedding, love had grown between them, not the desperate, consuming passion she'd known with Thomas, but something steadier, deeper, a partnership forged in shared purpose and mutual respect. As they returned to the schoolhouse, Sarah felt a curious certainty settle over her. Whatever Harrington and his supporters might do next, they had built something worth fighting for. Not just a school, but a community, a family. The weeks that followed brought an uneasy peace. Territorial certification moved forward, with Gladys submitting her formal evaluation as promised. Harrington remained hostile, but seemed temporarily stymied by the official support for Sarah's school. Most surprising was the gradual shift in town sentiment. As children returned home, speaking excitedly of their lessons, sharing knowledge and asking questions, some parents found their opposition wavering. Sarah's students were noticeably ahead of their town-schooled peers, a fact even the most prejudiced citizens couldn't ignore. One warm afternoon in late May, Ethan returned from hunting to find Sarah sitting motionless on the porch steps, a letter in her hands, her expression unreadable. "Sarah," he asked, setting down his gear and moving quickly to her side. "What's wrong?" She looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Nothing's wrong," she said softly. "It's from Carson City. The Territorial Board has granted us full certification as an independent school." Ethan's face broke into a rare, uninhibited smile. "That's good news, then?" "It's more than that," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "They've allocated funds, substantial funds, for expansion, for books, supplies, even for hiring an additional teacher as our enrollment grows." Ethan sat beside her, taking in the implications. "They believe in your school." "Our school," Sarah corrected. She took his hand, guiding it gently to rest against her midsection. "Our future." It took Ethan a moment to understand, his eyes widening as comprehension dawned. "Your—" Sarah nodded, a mixture of joy and apprehension crossing her features. "I suspected for weeks but wasn't certain until yesterday." "A child," Ethan whispered, awe transforming his weathered face. "Our child." The words hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. After a moment, Ethan asked, "Are you happy about this?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Another man might have assumed her feelings, might have celebrated without ensuring. She shared his joy. But Ethan, observant, thoughtful Ethan, understood the complexity of her emotions. "I'm terrified," she admitted honestly. "After losing Thomas, I never imagined having a family again. And now, with the school, with everything we're building here—" She trailed off, searching for words. "Too much change," Ethan supplied gently. "Too fast." Sarah nodded, grateful for his understanding. "But I'm also—" She placed her hand over his, still resting on her stomach. "I'm also happier than I believed possible. A year ago, I was alone, grieving, trying to find purpose in a hostile town. Now I have work that matters, children who are thriving under our care, and you—" Her voice caught. "I have you, and soon, this child." Ethan's eyes shone with emotion he rarely expressed in words. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers in an intimate gesture that had become their own private language. "We'll build bigger school," he said finally. His practical, nature asserting itself. "More room for children, room for nursery." Sarah laughed, tension breaking. "One step at a time," she cautioned, though her mind was already racing ahead, envisioning their growing family, their expanding school. That evening, they shared the news with their closest allies, Gladys Warren, who'd become a trusted friend, and mentor, and Jacob Harrington, who'd continued attending the mountain school despite his father's disapproval. "So I'll have a new student in about 7 months, Gladys teased, her eyes twinkling. Jacob's reaction was more hesitant. "Will you still teach us?" he asked, anxiety creasing his young brow. "When the baby comes?" "Nothing will change about our school," Sarah assured him, "except that we'll be growing in every sense." Later, as they prepared for bed, Ethan grew unusually talkative, laying out plans for expanding the cabin, building nursery furniture, ensuring everything would be ready when the time came. "We'll need to hire help," Sarah pointed out practically. "I can't manage the school and a newborn alone." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Your sister," he suggested, "the one who writes. Could she come?" Sarah had mentioned Eleanor only briefly, her younger sister who'd chosen a writer's life in Boston rather than marriage. "I don't know," she said honestly. "She's very independent, very modern in her thinking." "Like someone else I know," Ethan observed with a hint of a smile. Sarah considered the possibility. Eleanor had always been restless in the confines of proper society. Perhaps the freedom of the mountains, the purpose of the school, would appeal to her free-spirited nature. "I'll write her tomorrow," she decided. As summer bloomed across the mountains, bringing longer days and the sweet scent of wildflowers, their plans unfolded with surprising smoothness. The territorial funds arrived, allowing them to purchase needed supplies and begin construction on an expanded schoolhouse. Enrollment continued to grow, with 23 students now making the daily trek up the mountain path. Most surprising was the gradual thawing of relations with some townspeople. Mrs. Carson, once Sarah's most vocal critic, appeared one day with her youngest daughter in tow, reluctantly requesting enrollment. 3 more families followed, drawn by reports of their children's achievements. Even Harrington seemed to have retreated, focusing his energies on a bid for town council rather than opposing their school. Jacob continued to flourish, his natural intelligence nurtured by Sarah's teaching and Ethan's practical guidance. The boys spent increasing time at their cabin, learning woodcraft from Ethan and advanced mathematics from Sarah, becoming almost a part of their growing family. By late July, Sarah's condition was becoming visible, her dresses straining slightly. At the waist, the summer heat made teaching more challenging, but she refused to reduce her hours, determined to establish firm foundations before her confinement would force a temporary absence. Eleanor had responded enthusiastically to Sarah's letter, promising to arrive by early autumn. "A mountain school and a mountain niece or nephew," she'd written. "What an adventure this shall be." Life settled into a rhythm of purpose and anticipation. Each morning, Sarah and Ethan would rise with the sun, sharing quiet moments before the day's demands began. He would hunt or work on the school expansion. She would teach until mid-afternoon, then rest, while the older students led younger ones in nature studies or practical skills. Evenings brought planning for the baby, preparation for Eleanor's arrival, and the deepening bond between them, a love that had grown from unexpected seeds into something strong and enduring. Then came the morning Sarah woke to find Ethan already dressed, his expression grave as he stood by their bedroom window. "What is it?" she asked, pushing herself up against the pillows. "Smoke," he replied, echoing that terrible day when they'd found her cabin burning. "Coming from town." Sarah joined him at the window, squinting toward Oak Ridge. Sure enough, a thick plume of dark smoke rose against the clear morning sky. "Could be anything," she said, though a knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. "A cook fire gone wrong, or—" "School," Ethan interrupted quietly. "It's coming from the direction of the town school." After Gladys departed, Sarah and Ethan stood together watching the children emerge from hiding, returning to the schoolhouse with relieved chatter. The confrontation had shaken them. But children are resilient. Already their focus shifted to the day's lessons, the excitement of learning overshadowing fear. "They're brave," Ethan observed, his voice holding a note of pride. "They learned from you," Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. "We all did." Ethan shook his head. "From each other." He looked down at her, his expression softening. "You've brought life here, to this mountain, to me." The simple admission warmed Sarah more than any elaborate declaration could have. In the months since their hasty wedding, love had grown between them, not the desperate, consuming passion she'd known with Thomas, but something steadier, deeper, a partnership forged in shared purpose and mutual respect. As they returned to the schoolhouse, Sarah felt a curious certainty settle over her. Whatever Harrington and his supporters might do next, they had built something worth fighting for. Not just a school, but a community, a family. The weeks that followed brought an uneasy peace. Territorial certification moved forward, with Gladys submitting her formal evaluation as promised. Harrington remained hostile but seemed temporarily stymied by the official support for Sarah's school. Most surprising was the gradual shift in town sentiment. As children returned home speaking excitedly of their lessons, sharing knowledge and asking questions, some parents found their opposition wavering. Sarah's students were noticeably ahead of their town-schooled peers, a fact even the most prejudiced citizens couldn't ignore. One warm afternoon in late May, Ethan returned from hunting to find Sarah sitting motionless on the porch steps, a letter in her hands, her expression unreadable. "Sarah?" he asked, setting down his gear and moving quickly. To her side, "What's wrong?" She looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Nothing's wrong," she said softly. "It's from Carson City. The Territorial Board has granted us full certification as an independent school." Ethan's face broke into a rare, uninhibited smile. "That's good news, then?" "It's more than that," Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. "They've allocated funds, substantial funds for expansion, for books, supplies, even for hiring an additional teacher as our enrollment grows." Ethan sat beside her, taking in the implications. "They believe in your school." "Our school," Sarah corrected. She took his hand, guiding it gently to rest against her midsection. "Our future." It took Ethan a moment to understand, his eyes widening as comprehension dawned. "Your—" Sarah nodded, a mixture of joy and apprehension crossing her features. "I suspected for weeks, but wasn't certain until yesterday." "A child," Ethan whispered, awe transforming his weathered face. "Our child." The words hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. After a moment, Ethan asked, "Are you happy about this?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Another man might have assumed her feelings, might have celebrated without ensuring. She shared his joy, but Ethan, observant, thoughtful Ethan, understood the complexity of her emotions. "I'm terrified," she admitted honestly. "After losing Thomas, I never imagined having a family again. And now, with the school, with everything we're building here—" She trailed off, searching for words. "Too much change," Ethan supplied gently. "Too fast." Sarah nodded, grateful for his understanding. "But I'm also—" She placed her hand over his, still resting on her stomach. "I'm also happier than I believed possible. A year ago I was alone, grieving, trying to find purpose in a hostile town. Now I have work that matters, children who are thriving under our care, and you—" Her voice caught. "I have you, and soon this child." Ethan's eyes shone with emotion he rarely expressed in words. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers in an intimate gesture that had become their own private language. "We'll build bigger school," he said finally, his practical nature asserting itself. "More room for children, room for nursery." Sarah laughed, tension breaking. "One step at a time," she cautioned, though her mind was already racing ahead, envisioning their growing family, their expanding school. That evening they shared the news with their closest allies, Gladys Warren, who'd become a trusted friend, and mentor, and Jacob Harrington, who'd continued attending the mountain school despite his father's disapproval. "So I'll have a new student in about 7 months, Gladys teased, her eyes twinkling. Jacob's reaction was more hesitant. "Will you still teach us?" he asked, anxiety creasing his young brow. "When the baby comes?" "Nothing will change about our school," Sarah assured him, "except that we'll be growing in every sense." Later, as they prepared for bed, Ethan grew unusually talkative, laying out plans for expanding the cabin, building nursery furniture, ensuring everything would be ready when the time came. "We'll need to hire help," Sarah pointed out practically. "I can't manage the school and a newborn alone." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Your sister," he suggested, "the one who writes. Could she come?" Sarah had mentioned Eleanor only briefly, her younger sister, who'd chosen a writer's life in Boston rather than marriage. "I don't know," she said honestly. "She's very independent, very modern in her thinking. Like someone else I know, Ethan observed with a hint of a smile. Sarah considered the possibility. Eleanor had always been restless in the confines of proper society. Perhaps the freedom of the mountains, the purpose of the school, would appeal to her free-spirited nature. "I'll write her tomorrow," she decided, as summer bloomed across the mountains, bringing longer days and the sweet scent of wildflowers. Their plans unfolded with surprising smoothness. The territorial funds arrived, allowing them to purchase needed supplies and begin construction on an expanded schoolhouse. Enrollment continued to grow, with 23 students now making the daily trek up the mountain path. Most surprising was the gradual thawing of relations with some townspeople. Mrs. Carson, once Sarah's most vocal critic, appeared one day with her youngest daughter in tow, reluctantly requesting enrollment. 3 more families followed, drawn by reports of their children's achievements. Even Harrington seemed to have retreated, focusing his energies on a bid for town council rather than opposing their school. Jacob continued to flourish, his natural intelligence nurtured by Sarah's teaching and Ethan's practical guidance. The boy spent increasing time at their cabin, learning woodcraft from Ethan and advanced mathematics from Sarah, becoming almost a part of their growing family. By late July, Sarah's condition was becoming visible, her dresses straining slightly. At the waist, the summer heat made teaching more challenging, but she refused to reduce her hours, determined to establish firm foundations before her confinement would force a temporary absence. Eleanor had responded enthusiastically to Sarah's letter promising to arrive by early autumn. "A mountain school and a mountain niece or nephew," she'd written. "What an adventure this shall be." Life settled into a rhythm of purpose and anticipation. Each morning, Sarah and Ethan would rise with the sun, sharing quiet moments before the day's demands began. He would hunt or work on the school expansion. She would teach until mid-afternoon, then rest while the older students led younger ones in nature studies or practical skills. Evenings brought planning for the baby, preparation for Eleanor's arrival, and the deepening bond between them. A love that had grown from unexpected seeds into something strong and enduring. Then came the morning Sarah woke to find Ethan already dressed, his expression grave as he stood by their bedroom window. "What is it?" she asked, pushing herself up against the pillows. "Smoke," he replied, echoing that terrible day when they'd found her cabin burning. "Coming from town." Sarah joined him at the window, squinting toward Oak Ridge. Sure enough, a thick plume of dark smoke rose against the clear morning sky. "Could be anything," she said, though a knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. "A cook fire gone wrong, or school," Ethan interrupted quietly. "It's coming from the direction of the town school." Dawn broke over the mountain in ribbons of gold and amber, casting long shadows across the newly expanded schoolhouse. Sarah stood on the porch, watching the first wagon wind its way up the path, loaded with children from town. Behind her, the classroom buzzed with preparation, Ethan arranging additional desks, Jacob carefully laying out primers and chalk slates. "They're actually coming," Sarah whispered, one hand resting on her rounded belly. The child within kicked vigorously as if sharing her mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Did you doubt?" Ethan asked, joining her at the railing. Sarah smiled wryly. "I've learned to expect resistance, not cooperation, from Oak Ridge." The wagon drew closer, revealing Mrs. Carson at the reins, her face set in determination as children bounced excitedly on the benches behind her. Not just her own children, Sarah noted with surprise, but others. The butcher's twins, the blacksmith's daughter, even Reverend Miller's grandchildren. "Seems hatred of Thomas Harrington runs deeper than fear of us," Ethan observed with unexpected insight. When the wagon reached the clearing, children spilled out like water from a broken dam. their voices carrying in the crisp morning air. Mrs. Carson approached more sedately, her expression a complex mixture of embarrassment and resolve. "Mrs. Ward," she began stiffly, "I've brought 12 children who wish to continue their education. There will be more tomorrow. Some parents needed convincing." "Thank you, Mrs. Carson," Sarah replied, choosing graciousness over memory of past slights. "The children are most welcome." The older woman's eyes darted to Sarah's midsection, then away. That is, the wagon route is quite long. I'd be willing to drive it daily for now." Sarah recognized the olive branch for what it was. "We would appreciate that greatly." As Mrs. Carson turned to go, she hesitated. "My Josh speaks very highly of your teaching methods. Says you make him want to learn." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "My husband never thought that boy would amount to much. Too dreamy," he said. "Not practical enough." Sarah thought of Josh Carson, a quiet boy with thoughtful eyes and a gift for poetry that the town school had never nurtured. "Your son has a beautiful mind," she said simply. "Different, not deficient." Something loosened in Mrs. Carson's stern face. "Perhaps we've all been too quick to judge what's different," she murmured, then straightened her shoulders and returned to the wagon. By mid-morning, the expanded school was in full swing. Sarah had divided the children by ability rather than age, a radical approach that allowed each student to progress at their own pace. Older students helped younger ones, creating a collaborative atmosphere unlike the rigid structure of the town school. Jacob, particularly, shone in this environment. Free from his father's shadow and the town's expectations, he revealed himself as a natural leader and teacher. Sarah watched with pride as he patiently guided a group of younger children through their letters, his previous anxiety replaced by quiet confidence. As noon approached, Ethan quietly took over, leading the children in practical lessons: plant identification, simple carpentry, map reading. Sarah retired to the cabin to rest, her body demanding concessions her mind was reluctant to make. From the bedroom window she could see the schoolyard, where Ethan, once so solitary, moved among the children with unexpected ease, his deep voice carrying as he explained how to find north without a compass. The scene brought tears to her eyes. 6 months ago, he'd been the feared mountain man, and she a lonely widow struggling to find purpose. Now they stood at the center of something remarkable, not just a marriage or a school, but a challenge to the very foundations of Oak Ridge's rigid society. A sharp knock interrupted her reflections. Sarah opened the door to find Sheriff Davis shifting awkwardly on her porch, hat in hands. "Mrs. Ward," he began, his discomfort evident. "Might I have a word?" She led him to the kitchen, offering coffee, which he accepted with visible relief. "I expect this is about Jacob," she said, deciding directness was best. Davis nodded grimly. "Harrington's raising hell in town. Says you've kidnapped his boy." "Jacob came to us," Sarah corrected, "after his father beat him for attending our school." "So the boy claims," Davis said, though his expression suggested he didn't doubt it. "Harrington tells a different story. Says the boy's been corrupted by your teaching, turned against his own father." Sarah felt anger flash through her. Did Harrington explain the bruises on his son's arms, or why Jacob is terrified to return home? Davis stared into his coffee. "Ma'am, I don't make the laws. A father has rights over his children, even when he trailed off, even when he's abusive, even when he's threatened a pregnant woman and burned down a schoolhouse." The words escaped before Sarah could temper them. The sheriff's head snapped up. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Ward." "One his own son can confirm," Sarah replied steadily. "Jacob heard his father planning the fire with Reynolds and Cooper." Davis set down his cup, his weathered face troubled. "That would be arson, destruction of public property, prison offense." "Yes," Sarah agreed, "it would." A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Davis sighed. I've known Thomas Harrington since we were boys. He wasn't always like this, bitter, vengeful. His wife's death changed him. Grief changes everyone, Sarah said softly, thinking of her own journey after Thomas's death. But it doesn't excuse cruelty, especially to a child. Davis nodded slowly. No, Ma'am, it doesn't. He rose, settling his hat back on his head. I'll need to speak with the boy, hear his account directly. He's teaching right now, Sarah replied, protective instinct rising. Can it wait until lessons end? Something like respect flickered in the sheriff's eyes. Teaching, is he? Well, that's unexpected. He moved toward the door. I'll return this afternoon, but Mrs. Ward, he paused, his expression grave. Harrington won't let this go, and he's got powerful friends in the territory. After he left, Sarah sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The baby shifted restlessly within her, responding to her tension. She placed both hands on her belly, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. It will be all right, she whispered, uncertain whether she was reassuring her unborn child or herself. The afternoon brought Sheriff Davis back as promised, along with an unexpected visitor, Judge William Creighton from the Territorial Court, a stern-faced man whose reputation for fairness was matched only by his intimidating demeanor. As they approached the schoolhouse, Sarah felt Ethan stiffen beside her. Judge rides circuit, he murmured. Shouldn't be here, which means someone pulled strings to bring him, Sarah concluded grimly. The judge surveyed the school with shrewd eyes, taking in the children working diligently at their lessons, the orderly arrangement of the expanded classroom, the evident care that had gone into creating this learning environment. Impressive operation, Mrs. Ward, he commented, his voice betraying no emotion. Quite different from what I was led to expect. Before Sarah could respond, Jacob emerged from among the students, his face pale but determined. Are you here to make me go back? He asked directly, looking between the sheriff and Judge. Judge Creighton studied the boy thoughtfully. That depends. On many things, young man. I understand you've made some serious accusations about your father. Jacob's chin lifted in a gesture Sarah had come to recognize as his gathering courage. Not accusations. Truth. I'd like to hear this truth, the judge said, his tone gentling slightly. Perhaps somewhere private? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah led them to the cabin, where Ethan had built a small study off the main room. While the judge spoke with Jacob privately, Sarah and Ethan waited in tense silence, the sheriff shifting, uncomfortably nearby. He's a good judge, Davis offered eventually. Fair, doesn't favor wealth or position. Then Jacob has nothing to fear, Sarah replied, praying it was true. After what seemed like hours, the study door opened. Jacob emerged first, his expression unreadable, followed by the judge whose stern countenance had softened almost imperceptibly. Sheriff, Judge Creighton said, I believe we have sufficient cause to investigate Mr. Harrington for arson and child endangerment. He turned to Sarah and Ethan. The boy stays here for now, under your guardianship, pending formal proceedings. Relief washed over Sarah so intensely she had to grasp the table for support. Ethan's hand found her shoulder, steady and reassuring. What about his father? Sarah asked. Harrington won't accept this quietly. No, I don't expect he will, the judge agreed, which is why I'm leaving Deputy Marshal Fletcher here as protection until this matter is resolved. He nodded toward a young man who had been waiting outside, his U.S. Marshal's badge glinting. In the afternoon light, as they prepared to leave, Judge Creighton paused. Mrs. Ward, I must admit I arrived with certain preconceptions about your school. Thomas Harrington has influential friends who painted quite a different picture. His eyes swept the classroom once more. I'm pleased to have been mistaken. That evening, As the last wagon of children departed for town, a strange calm settled over the mountain. Deputy Fletcher established himself in the small outrider's cabin near the main path, his presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the danger that still loomed. Jacob, freed from the immediate fear of returning to his father, seemed to shed years of tension. He helped Ethan with evening chores, chattering about his day, teaching the younger children, his natural enthusiasm breaking through the defensive shell he'd worn for so long. "He belongs here," Sarah told Ethan as they prepared for bed that night. "Watching him today, it's like seeing a different child entirely." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Never expected this," he admitted. Teaching, children, family. A rare, full smile transformed his face. "Better than expected," Sarah laughed softly, covering his large hand with hers where it rested on her belly. "Much better." Their peaceful moment shattered at dawn with the sound of approaching horses. Many horses moving fast. Ethan was up instantly, rifle in hand, as he moved to the window. "Riders," he reported tersely. "Too many." Sarah struggled to rise, her advanced pregnancy making quick movements difficult. "Harrington?" "Yes," Ethan confirmed grimly. "And others." "Deputy." Fletcher was already on the porch when they emerged, his young face set in lines of determination. "Stay inside, Mrs. Ward," he ordered. "Mr. Ward, get your shotgun if you have one." But Sarah wouldn't be relegated to safety, not when everything they'd built was threatened. "Jacob," she called, finding the boy wide-eyed with fear in the doorway. "Take the back trail to town. Find Judge Creighton. Tell him what's happening." Jacob's face paled. "I can't leave you." "You can," Sarah interrupted firmly. "You must." Ethan's hand settled on the boy's shoulder. "Quick now," he urged. "Through the trees, like I taught you." As Jacob disappeared into the forest, Harrington's party thundered. Into the clearing, 8 men on horseback, Harrington himself in the lead, his face contorted with rage. Behind them rolled a wagon containing several more men, including Reynolds and Cooper. "That's far enough," Deputy Fletcher called, his badge clearly visible as he stepped forward. "This property is under federal protection by order of Judge Creighton." Harrington reined in sharply, his eyes darting from the deputy to where Sarah and Ethan stood on the porch. "Federal protection?" he sneered. "For kidnappers and arsonists?" "Only arsonist here is you, Harrington," Ethan replied, his voice carrying across. "The clearing, where's my son?" Harrington demanded, ignoring the accusation. "I know you're hiding him." Deputy Fletcher stepped closer, hand resting on his holstered gun. "Mr. Harrington, you're in violation of a judicial order. I must ask you and your men to leave immediately." For a moment, it seemed Harrington might comply. Then Reynolds leaned forward from his saddle, whispering something in his ear. Harrington's expression shifted from rage to calculated coldness. "We're not here for trouble, Deputy," he said, his tone suddenly reasonable. "Just concerned citizens checking on our children's welfare." He gestured toward the schoolhouse, making sure they're receiving proper moral instruction. "School's closed today," Ethan stated flatly. "No children here?" Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then you won't mind if we have a look around. Ease our minds." Before the deputy could respond, Cooper and 2 other men from the wagon broke away, moving quickly toward the schoolhouse. Deputy Fletcher drew his weapon, but found himself facing several armed riders. "I wouldn't," Reynolds advised, his own rifle trained on the young lawman. "Federal badge don't stop bullets." Sarah felt Ethan tense beside her, ready to intervene. She clutched his arm. "No," she whispered. "Too many, too dangerous." For a terrible moment, violence hung in the air like a thundercloud ready to break. Then a new sound cut through the tension, wagon wheels approaching rapidly from the town. A road. All eyes turned as a carriage rounded the bend, moving at dangerous speed. It pulled up sharply, and from it emerged Judge Creighton, Sheriff Davis, and to Sarah's astonishment, her sister Eleanor, looking travel-worn but determined. "What?" is the meaning of this?" the judge demanded, his authoritative voice silencing even Harrington momentarily. Sheriff Davis moved quickly to Deputy Fletcher's side, his own weapon drawn. "Thomas," he said grimly, "you boys are making a serious mistake. We're just concerned." "Citizens," Harrington began, but the judge cut him off. "Save your pretenses, Harrington. I've just come from interviewing Mr. Reynolds's wife, who was apparently troubled enough by your plans to send word to my chambers." His stern gaze swept the assembled men. "She described in detail your intention to burn down this school as you did the town's, regardless of who might be inside." Several of Harrington's supporters exchanged uneasy glances, their resolve visibly wavering. "That woman's hysterical," Reynolds protested weakly. "Imagining things." "Perhaps," the judge conceded, "but I've also received sworn testimony from your co-conspirators in the town school arson, men unwilling to face prison for your vendetta, Harrington. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." The blood drained from Harrington's face. "They're lying," he insisted, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Thomas Harrington," Sheriff Davis announced formally, "you're under arrest for arson, conspiracy, and child endangerment." He nodded to Deputy Fletcher. "Secure these men." For a heartbeat, it seemed Harrington might resist. Then his shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him as his supporters began to disperse, none willing to defy both territorial and federal law. As Davis led Harrington away in handcuffs, the man paused before Sarah. "This isn't justice," he spat. "It's theft. You've stolen my son, my standing, everything." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "No, Mr. Harrington, you lost those things yourself through cruelty and fear." Once the clearing emptied of all but Judge Creighton and Eleanor, Sarah finally allowed herself to acknowledge her sister's unexpected presence. "Ellie?" she whispered, scarcely believing the evidence of her eyes. "You weren't due for weeks yet." Eleanor rushed forward, enfolding Sarah in a fierce embrace. "Your last letter worried me," she explained. "I caught the first train west." She drew back, taking in Sarah's condition with wide eyes. "Though I see I nearly arrived too late." Judge Creighton cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to your reunion," he said. "Deputy Fletcher will remain until things settle, and Mrs. Ward," he added, his stern face softening slightly. "The Territorial Board has asked me to convey their continued support for your school. What you've built here is quite extraordinary." After he departed, Eleanor linked her arm through Sarah's, guiding her back to the cabin. "So, sister mine," she said, eyes twinkling with familiar mischief, "you must tell me everything. How my proper cautious sister became a mountain woman, married a legend, and started a revolution in education, all in less than a year." Ethan, following behind with Eleanor's luggage, caught Sarah's eye over her sister's head. His slight smile conveyed everything words couldn't: amusement at Eleanor's whirlwind energy, gratitude for her timely arrival, and deep, abiding love for the life they'd created together. Jacob emerged from the forest path as they reached the porch, his face lighting with relief at seeing them safe. "I found the judge," he announced proudly. "I ran all the way to town. You were very brave," Sarah assured him, drawing him close with her free arm. "Thanks to you, everyone is safe." Eleanor's sharp eyes missed nothing. "And who is this young man?" she asked, her tone deliberately casual, though her expression showed keen interest. "This is Jacob," Sarah replied simply. "Our son." The word hung in the air, new and momentous. Jacob froze, his eyes widening as he looked from Sarah to Ethan. Seeking confirmation, Ethan placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Our son," he repeated firmly. Jacob's face transformed, joy breaking through like sunrise over the mountains. "Really, even when the baby comes?" "Especially then," Sarah assured him. "Brothers should grow up together." "Or brother and sister." Eleanor interjected pragmatically, though I suspect this young man would be an excellent brother to either. That night, with Eleanor settled in the guest room and Jacob finally asleep after the day's excitement, Sarah and Ethan sat before the fire, processing all that had occurred. "It happened so fast," Sarah marveled. "This morning Harrington seemed invincible. Now, justice," Ethan said simply, though his expression suggested he found it as surprising as she did. Sarah leaned into his solid warmth. "Do you think it's truly over?" His hatred seemed so consuming. Ethan considered this, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "Hatred burns hot," he finally said, "but burns out quicker than love." He turned to her, his weathered face softened by firelight. "Built school on love will last longer." The profound simplicity of his observation brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "When did my silent mountain man become so wise?" she teased gently. His rare, full smile appeared. "Had good teacher." As autumn painted the mountains in crimson and gold, life settled into a new rhythm. With Harrington awaiting trial in the territorial capital, Oakridge began a slow but perceptible thaw toward the mountain school. Children continued to arrive daily, now with parental support rather than suspicion. Eleanor proved an unexpected blessing, not just as help with Sarah's increasingly uncomfortable pregnancy, but as a teacher in her own right. Her unconventional methods and boundless energy complemented Sarah's more structured approach, creating an educational environment unlike anything the territory had seen. Jacob blossomed under their combined care, his natural intelligence nurtured by Sarah's guidance, his confidence bolstered by Ethan's quiet approval, and his imagination sparked by Eleanor's adventurous spirit. The formal adoption proceedings began, moving with surprising swiftness thanks to Judge Creighton's influence. As October's chill gave way to November's first snows, Sarah felt the baby drop lower, a sure sign that her time approached. One crisp afternoon, as she supervised the younger children's reading lesson, a sharp pain gripped her midsection. Eleanor noticed immediately, crossing the classroom to take her arm. "Is it time?" she asked, voice low to avoid alarming the students. Sarah nodded, breathing carefully through the contraction. "I think so, but there's still an hour of lessons, which I am perfectly capable of completing," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "Ethan!" she called through the open door where he was constructing new benches for the expanding student body. He appeared instantly, a question in his eyes that became understanding as he saw Sarah's posture. Without a word, he crossed to her side, scooping her gently into his arms despite her protests. "Children," Eleanor announced with characteristic flair, "today's science lesson will be slightly altered. It appears Baby Ward has decided to join us a bit earlier than expected." To Sarah's surprise, the children erupted not in chaos, but in organized activity. Older students immediately took charge of younger ones, continuing lessons with practiced ease. Jacob appeared at Ethan's side, face serious with responsibility. "I'll fetch water and heat it," he said, repeating instructions Sarah had obviously prepared him for, "and send Tom Carson to get Doc Wilson from town." As Ethan carried her to their bedroom, Sarah felt a wave of emotion unlike anything she'd experienced before, not just pain and anticipation, but profound gratitude for this unlikely family they'd created. The silent mountain man who'd found his voice, the orphaned boy who'd found his courage, the unconventional sister who'd found her purpose and herself, the grieving widow who'd found not just a new life, but an entire community. The labor progressed. Swiftly, Eleanor proving a capable midwife until Doc Wilson arrived, huffing from the hurried journey up the mountain. Outside, Sarah was dimly aware of children being dismissed, of Jacob organizing older students to keep younger ones occupied, of Ethan's steady presence whenever she reached for him. As the November sun slipped behind the mountains, casting the room in amber light, Sarah's daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that seemed to echo off the cabin walls. "She has her mother's determination," Doc Wilson observed, with a tired smile as he placed the swaddled infant in Sarah's arms. Ethan knelt beside the bed, his weathered face transformed by wonder as he gently touched his daughter's tiny hand. "Beautiful," he whispered, the word containing volumes of emotion. "Jacob," Sarah called softly, sensing the boy's hesitant presence in the doorway. "Come meet your sister." He approached cautiously, eyes wide with fascination. "She's so small," he breathed. "What's her name?" Sarah exchanged a glance with Ethan, a silent confirmation of a decision they'd made weeks before. "Hope," she said, the name feeling right on her lips. "Hope Elizabeth Ward." "Hope," Jacob repeated solemnly, then broke into a grin as the baby's fingers closed reflexively around his offered fingertip. "She's strong." "Like her family," Ethan agreed, his arm encircling them all in a protective embrace. Later, as moonlight silvered the frost-covered landscape outside their window, Sarah nursed her daughter while Ethan sat beside them, his quiet presence a comfort deeper than words. "I never imagined this," she confessed softly. "After Thomas died, I thought my chance for family had died with him." Ethan's hand found hers, his calloused thumb tracing gentle circles on her skin. "Life surprises," he said simply. Sarah smiled, thinking of all the unexpected turns that had led to this moment, from the hostile reception in Oak Ridge to the burning of her cabin, from Ethan's silent assistance to the building of their school, from Jacob's brave defiance to Hope's miraculous arrival. "Yes," she agreed, gazing down at her daughter's peaceful face. "The best surprises of all." Outside, the first heavy snow of winter began to fall, blanketing the mountain in pristine white. But inside the cabin, warmth radiated not just from the crackling fire, but from the bonds between these unlikely souls who had found in each other what the world had tried to deny them: acceptance, purpose, and most importantly, love. For Sarah, Miller Ward, once left to die by town bullies, the journey had come full circle. The silent mountain man who'd saved her had given her not just his name, but a new beginning, one built not on the ashes of what was lost, but on the promise of what could be. "Not just a position," Dr. Hammond corrected, "a professorship, the opportunity to train the next generation of teachers in your methods, to develop curriculum that could be implemented throughout the territory." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. A professorship, the kind of recognition she'd never dreamed possible, especially for a woman. The chance to influence education far beyond their mountain, to transform learning for countless children. I'm honored," she managed, glancing at Ethan, whose expression revealed nothing to strangers, but spoke volumes to her. "But I would need to discuss this with my family. We've built a life here." "Of course," Professor Daniels nodded, understanding. "We wouldn't expect you to uproot immediately. The position would begin next autumn, allowing ample time for transition." Judge Creighton cleared his throat. "I took the liberty of suggesting that the university consider accommodating your unique situation," he said, his stern features softening slightly as he looked at baby Hope. "They're prepared to offer housing for your entire family and educational opportunities for young Jacob, of course." "And the Mountain Academy?" Sarah asked, her mind racing. "The students, the teachers would continue," Eleanor interjected. "Did you think we couldn't manage without you?" Her tone was teasing, but her eyes held sincere reassurance. "You've built something that can stand on its own, Sarah. That's the mark of true accomplishment." As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself watching the celebration with new eyes. The academy students demonstrated their learning for the townspeople, Jacob leading a presentation on local geology, older students explaining solar calculations. the youngest reciting poetry they'd written themselves. "So proud," Ethan murmured, appearing beside her as she observed from a quiet corner. "They've accomplished so much," Sarah agreed, leaning against his solid presence. Ethan shook his head slightly. "Meant you," he clarified. "Professor Sarah Ward." The title sent a thrill through her, immediately followed by uncertainty. "I haven't accepted yet," she reminded him. "It would mean leaving the mountain, the school, our home." Ethan considered. This, his eyes tracking Jacob across the room, where the boy was earnestly explaining a science experiment to several adults. "Home isn't place," he said finally. "It's people, family." Sarah studied his face, searching for any hint of reluctance. "You'd be willing to leave? After establishing yourself here?" His rare smile appeared, warming his weathered features. "Followed you up mountain," he reminded her. "Would follow you to university too." The simplicity of his devotion brought tears to her eyes. And what would the fearsome mountain man do in a university town? Ethan's expression turned thoughtful. "Build things," he suggested. "Teach practical skills to future teachers. Show them how to survive beyond classroom walls." A hint of mischief appeared in his eyes. "Maybe learn to read more books." Sarah laughed softly, reaching for his hand. "You might become quite the scholar." "Unlikely," he acknowledged, squeezing her fingers gently. "But we'll try, for you, for children." As they made their way home that night, Jacob half asleep on his pony, Hope bundled warmly against the spring evening's chill, Eleanor chattering excitedly about the possibilities awaiting them in Wellington, Sarah felt suspended between two worlds. Behind lay the mountain that had sheltered them, the school they'd built from nothing, the community that had finally reluctantly embraced them. Ahead stretched an unknown path, bright with promise but unmarked by familiar landmarks. "What are you thinking?" Eleanor asked, noticing her silence as they approached the house. "That change never stops," Sarah replied honestly. "Just when you think you've found solid ground, the earth shifts again." Eleanor's expression softened with unusual gentleness. "That's life, dearest, especially a well-lived one." The following weeks brought a flurry of correspondence with Wellington University, detailing the particulars of the offered position. The more Sarah learned, the more compelling the opportunity became. Not just teaching, but publishing her methods, influencing educational policy throughout the territory, perhaps eventually the nation. Yet each morning, as she watched sunlight paint the mountainside in gold, as students arrived eager for the day's lessons, as Ethan and Jacob worked together on endless projects around the property, doubts crept in. How could she leave this place that had healed her, transformed her, given her a second chance at happiness? "You're overthinking," Eleanor observed bluntly one afternoon, finding Sarah staring at the university's latest letter. "The decision isn't nearly as complicated as you're making it," Sarah sighed. "Easy for you to say. You've always embraced change, rushed toward new adventures." "Yes, and you've always been the cautious one, weighing every possibility," Eleanor agreed, settling beside her. "But Sarah, consider what you'd be abandoning by refusing this position." "I'd be abandoning plenty by accepting it," Sarah countered. "Our home, the school we've built, physical things," Eleanor dismissed with a wave. "The school will continue. I've already spoken with Gladys Warren about taking a more active role if you leave." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "You've been planning my departure behind my back?" Eleanor had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Planning for contingencies," she corrected, "and avoiding sentimentality. This opportunity isn't just about you, Sarah. It's about the hundreds, perhaps thousands of children who could benefit from your methods if they were implemented widely." The weight of this responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders. "And what about Hope? Jacob, is it fair to uproot them for my career?" Eleanor's expression softened. Jacob worships the ground you walk on. He'd follow you anywhere, and hope is too young to know the difference. She reached for Sarah's hand. As for that mountain man of yours, have you actually asked what he wants? Sarah looked away. He says he'll support whatever I decide. Of course he does, Eleanor replied with exasperation. But that's not the same as telling you his own desires. That evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah found Ethan on the porch swing he'd built when Hope was born. The night was cool but pleasant. Stars scattered across the velvet sky. Like diamonds, she settled beside him, drawing comfort from his familiar warmth. Eleanor thinks I'm overthinking the Wellington position, she admitted. Ethan's soft chuckle rumbled through him. Eleanor thinks everyone overthinks everything. She's right, though, Sarah sighed. I've been agonizing over this decision for weeks. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, gently pushing the swing with one foot. Ask me, he said finally. Sarah turned to face him, confused. Ask you what? What I want, he clarified. You've worried about children's school community. Haven't asked what I want. Heat crept into Sarah's cheeks. You're right, she acknowledged. I assumed you were being supportive but preferred to stay. Ethan shook his head slightly. Assumed wrong. Surprise flickered through her. You want to go to Wellington. Want what makes you whole, he replied, choosing his words with characteristic care. Saw you reading university letter, eyes lit up, mind racing with possibilities. His hand found hers in the darkness. Been holding yourself back. For me, for children don't. Emotion tightened Sarah's throat. But this is your home. You've lived on this mountain most of your life. Home is where family is, he repeated his earlier sentiment. Mountain taught me solitude, survival. His eyes met hers in the starlight. You taught me living, difference. Sarah leaned into him, absorbing the profound simplicity of his wisdom. What about your reputation? She asked, half teasing. The fearsome mountain man, living in a university town? His rare laugh vibrated through his chest. New legends to make, he suggested. Mountain man becomes scholar's husband. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The decision, once truly made, brought unexpected peace. Sarah wrote to accept the Wellington position, beginning the following autumn. The months ahead would be filled with preparation, both practical arrangements and ensuring the Mountain Academy could thrive in their absence. News spread quickly through the community. Some reactions were predictable. Gladys Warren's immediate, practical questions, Mrs. Carson's initial dismay, followed by grudging support. Others surprised Sarah, particularly the number of Oak Ridge residents who expressed genuine regret at their departure. But who'd have thought, Eleanor marveled one evening, sorting through the stack of well-wishes that had arrived, that the unwelcome widow and the feared mountain man would become town treasures. Jacob, initially quiet about the impending move, finally shared his thoughts as he helped Ethan construct crates for transporting their belongings. "Will there be mountains in Wellington?" he asked, carefully hammering a nail. "Smaller ones," Ethan replied honestly. "Different." Jacob nodded, solemnly absorbing this. "And will I go to school with other children there? Or will Mother teach me at home?" "University has school for faculty children," Ethan explained. "Good school, different from academy." The boy considered this, his young face serious beyond his. Years. "I think I'd like that," he decided finally. Meeting new children, learning new things. A shadow crossed his expression. "But I'll miss our students and Deputy Fletcher's tracking lessons." Ethan's hand settled on Jacob's shoulder. "Can visit," he assured the boy, and Fletcher promised to write, teach through letters. This brought a smile back to Jacob's face. "Maybe when I'm older I could come back and teach at the academy," he suggested. "After university." Ethan's eyes crinkled with pride. "Good plan," he approved. "Build on foundations." As summer ripened across the mountain, Sarah divided her time between academy administration, Wellington correspondence, and precious moments with her growing daughter. Hope thrived, her personality emerging with each passing week. Her father's watchful patience balanced by her mother's curiosity and a determined streak entirely her own. "She'll be walking before we reach Wellington," Sarah observed one evening, watching Hope pull herself up using the edge of a chair, tiny face set in concentration. "Running by Christmas," Ethan predicted, with a proud father's certainty. The weeks slipped by with increasing speed. Eleanor departed ahead of them, travelling to Wellington to oversee preparations for their arrival and to begin her own unexpected role. The university had offered her a position teaching literature, recognizing her published works and unconventional approach. Who would have imagined, she'd laughed before leaving, that both Miller sisters would end up as professors? Mother must be spinning in her grave. She always said we'd need husbands to have any security in life. August brought a steady stream of visitors, former students, community members, even Sheriff Davis and Judge Creighton, all coming to bid farewell. The Mountain Academy hosted a grand celebration, with children performing a play they'd written chronicling the school's remarkable journey. Jacob, taking center stage with newfound confidence, delivered the final lines. And so what began with a whisper of hope in the darkest winter became a beacon of light for all who seek knowledge. The Mountain Academy stands not as one woman's achievement, but as proof that together we can build something greater than ourselves. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience as Sarah stepped forward to embrace her son, her heart too full for words. Eldanor had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Planning for contingencies," she corrected, "and avoiding sentimentality. This opportunity isn't just about you, Sarah. It's about the hundreds, perhaps thousands of children who could benefit from your methods if they were implemented widely." The weight of this responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders. "And what about Hope, Jacob? Is it fair to uproot them for my career?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Jacob worships the ground you walk on. He'd follow you anywhere. And Hope is too young to know the difference." She reached for Sarah's hand. "As for that mountain man of yours, have you actually asked what he wants?" Sarah looked away. "He says he'll support whatever I decide." "Of course he does," Eleanor replied with exasperation. "But that's not the same as telling you his own desires." That evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah found Ethan on the porch swing he'd built when Hope was born. The night was cool but pleasant, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds. She settled beside him, drawing comfort from his familiar warmth. "Eleanor thinks I'm overthinking the Wellington position," she admitted. Ethan's soft chuckle rumbled through him. "Eleanor thinks everyone overthinks everything." "She's right, though," Sarah sighed. "I've been agonizing over this decision for weeks." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, gently pushing the swing with one foot. "Ask me," he said finally. Sarah turned to face him, confused. "Ask you what?" "What I want," he clarified. "You've worried about children's school community. Haven't asked what I want." Heat crept into Sarah's cheeks. "You're right," she acknowledged. "I assumed you were being supportive but preferred to stay." Ethan shook his head slightly. Assumed wrong. Surprise flickered through her. "You want to go to Wellington?" "Want what makes you whole," he replied, choosing his words with characteristic care. "Saw you reading University Letter." Eyes lit up, mind racing with possibilities. His hand found hers in the darkness. "Been holding yourself back. For me, for children. Don't." Emotion tightened Sarah's throat. But this is your home. You've lived on this mountain most of your life. Home is where family is, he repeated his earlier sentiment. Mountain taught me solitude, survival. His eyes met hers in the starlight. You taught me living, difference. Sarah leaned into him, absorbing the profound simplicity of his wisdom. What about your reputation? She asked, half teasing. The fearsome mountain man living in a university town? His rare laugh vibrated through his chest. New legends to make, he suggested. Mountain man becomes scholar's husband. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The decision, once truly made, brought unexpected peace. Sarah wrote to accept the Wellington position, beginning the following autumn. The months ahead would be filled with preparation, both practical arrangements and ensuring the Mountain Academy could thrive in their absence. News spread quickly through the community. Some reactions were predictable, Gladys Warren's immediate. Practical questions, Mrs. Carson's initial dismay, followed by grudging support. Others surprised Sarah, particularly the number of Oak Ridge residents who expressed genuine regret at their departure. Who'd have thought, Eleanor marveled one evening, sorting through the stack of well-wishes that had arrived, that the unwelcome widow and the feared mountain man would become town treasures. Jacob, initially quiet about the impending move, finally shared his thoughts as he helped Ethan construct crates for transporting their belongings. "Will there be mountains in Wellington?" he asked, carefully hammering a nail. "Smaller ones," Ethan replied honestly. "Different," Jacob nodded, solemnly absorbing this. "And will I go to school with other children there, or will Mother teach me at home?" "University has school for faculty children," Ethan explained. "Good school, different from academy." The boy considered this, his young face serious beyond his. "Years. I think I'd like that," he decided finally. Meeting new children, learning new things. A shadow crossed his expression. "But I'll miss our students and Deputy Fletcher's tracking lessons." Ethan's hand settled on Jacob's shoulder. "Can visit," he assured the boy, and Fletcher promised to write, teach through letters. This brought a smile back to Jacob's face. "Maybe when I'm older I could come back and teach at the academy," he suggested. After university, Ethan's eyes crinkled with pride. "Good plan," he approved. "Build on foundations." As summer ripened across the mountain, Sarah divided her time between academy administration, Wellington correspondence, and precious moments with her growing daughter. Hope thrived, her personality emerging with each passing week, her father's. Watchful patience balanced by her mother's curiosity, and a determined streak entirely her own. "She'll be walking before we reach Wellington," Sarah observed one evening, watching Hope pull herself up using the edge of a chair, tiny face set in concentration. "Running by Christmas," Ethan predicted with a proud father's certainty. The weeks slipped by with increasing speed. Eleanor departed ahead of them, traveling to Wellington to oversee preparations for their arrival and to begin her own unexpected role. The university had offered her a position teaching literature, recognizing her published works and unconventional approach. "Who would have imagined," she'd laughed before leaving, "that both Miller sisters would end up as professors? Mother must be spinning in her grave. She always said we'd need husbands to have any security in life." August brought a steady stream of visitors, former students, community members, even Sheriff Davis and Judge Creighton, all coming to bid farewell. The Mountain Academy hosted a grand celebration, with children performing a play they'd written chronicling the school's remarkable journey. Jacob, taking center stage with newfound confidence, delivered the final lines. And so, what began with a whisper of hope in the darkest winter became a beacon of light for all who seek knowledge. The Mountain Academy stands not as one woman's achievement, but as proof that together we can build something greater than ourselves. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience as Sarah stepped forward to embrace her son, her heart too full for words. The Wellington University campus sprawled before them like something from a fairy tale. Limestone buildings with soaring arches, walkways lined with ancient elms, and at its center, the gleaming dome of Pioneer Hall catching the September sunlight. Sarah stared through the carriage window, her heart hammering against her ribs as hope squirmed impatiently in her lap. "It's enormous," Jacob whispered, his face pressed to the glass, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Ethan sat across from them, his expression carefully neutral, though Sarah caught the slight tension in his jaw. For a man who had spent decades in mountain solitude, this bustling academic world represented a far greater challenge than he'd ever admit. "The faculty residences are beyond that grove," Sarah said, pointing to a cluster of handsome brick homes set slightly apart from the main campus. "Professor Daniels said ours is the third from the end." The driver guided their carriage through wrought iron gates and along a tree-lined drive. Students in smart attire paused to watch them pass, their curious gazes lingering on the unusual family, the composed woman with intelligent eyes, the massive bearded man whose watchful posture suggested more than a simple academic spouse, the wide-eyed boy and the babbling infant reaching for everything in sight. "There's Aunt Eleanor," Jacob exclaimed as they approached their destination. Eleanor stood waiting on the porch of a stately two-story home, waving enthusiastically. Unlike the journey-worn travelers, she looked remarkably at home in academic surroundings, dressed in a fashionable but practical ensemble that struck the perfect balance between respectability and her natural bohemian tendencies. "You've arrived at last," she called as the carriage halted. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your minds and retreated back to your mountain." As they disembarked, Sarah felt a momentary wave of disorientation. The ground beneath her feet seemed too flat, the air too still without mountain breezes, the sounds too human without the constant whisper of pines. Ethan's hand settled at the small of her back, steady and reassuring. "Different," he acknowledged quietly. "Not bad. Just different." The house proved larger than expected. 4 bedrooms, a study, a proper kitchen, and a walled garden where Ethan immediately began envisioning modifications. Eleanor had arranged everything with her usual efficiency, even hiring a local girl named Mary to help with hope and household tasks. "The university wants to host a reception tomorrow evening," Eleanor announced as they settled in the front parlor, Mary having taken Hope upstairs for a nap. Nothing excessive, just department heads and key faculty meeting the prestigious new Professor Ward and her family. Sarah's stomach tightened. On the mountain, her authority had grown organically from necessity and results. Here she would need to establish herself among lifelong academics, many of whom would view her frontier methods with skepticism. "Will there be other children?" Jacob asked, his earlier excitement dimming as he contemplated a house full of strange adults. "Professor Hammond has 2 boys near your age," Eleanor assured him, "and Dean Whitcomb's daughter Emily will be there. She's quite the scientific mind, I'm told." Jacob nodded, but his fingers worried the edge of his jacket, a nervous habit from his earliest days with them. Sarah reached over to squeeze his hand gently. "Remember when you first came to our mountain school?" she reminded him. "How frightened you were of the other children, and how quickly you found your place." Jacob's tension eased slightly. "This is different," he protested, but with less conviction. "Different," Ethan agreed, echoing his earlier assessment. "Not harder, just new." The boy straightened his shoulders, drawing from his adoptive father's steady confidence. "I'll try," he promised. Later, as Sarah unpacked her books in the study the university had furnished for her, Ethan appeared in the doorway, watching her methodical organization with a hint of amusement. "What?" she asked, catching his expression. "Same. Sarah," he observed. "Different mountain." The comparison startled a laugh from her. "Is that how you see this? Me climbing another mountain?" He crossed to help her shelve a particularly heavy volume on educational theory. "Always climbing," he replied, his voice holding admiration rather than criticism. "Higher, further, taking us with you." Sarah paused, suddenly struck by the immense journey they'd undertaken, not just the physical distance from Oak Ridge to Wellington, but the transformation of their lives. 2 years ago, she'd been a grieving widow facing hostile townspeople with nothing but determination and principles. Now she stood in a university study, a professor with a husband, 2 children, and opportunities beyond anything she'd imagined possible. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly, searching his face for any sign of regret. Ethan considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Not afraid," he finally decided. "Uncertain. Different paths ahead. Many I don't understand." Sarah touched his cheek, rough with the beard he'd trimmed, but refused to remove entirely, despite Wellington's more clean-shaven preferences. "We'll find our way together," she promised, "just as we did on the mountain." His smile, still rare, but more frequent now, warmed his entire face. "Together," he agreed. "Always stronger together." The university reception proved less daunting than Sarah had feared. While some faculty members clearly viewed her frontier background with skepticism, others showed genuine interest in her innovative methods. Several had already read her monograph on ability-based progression, published by Professor Daniels earlier that summer. "Your perspective is precisely what we need, Professor Ward," Dean Whitcomb told her, his aristocratic manner belied by surprisingly progressive views. "Too long has education been trapped by tradition rather than guided by results." Jacob, after an initial period of shyness, found himself drawn into conversation with Emily Whitcomb, a serious girl with spectacles and rapid-fire questions about mountain flora and fauna. By evening's end, they had established a plan to catalogue the university's botanical gardens, using Jacob's observational methods and Emily's systematic classification system. Ethan, as expected, attracted considerable curiosity. Many faculty wives approached Sarah with barely disguised interest in her unusual husband. "Mrs. Levinson was quite taken with your silent mountain man," Eleanor teased after the guest departed. "She kept asking if he had any brothers." Sarah laughed, helping Ethan gather empty glasses. "They see him as some exotic specimen," she observed. "They have no idea who he really is." "Let them wonder," Ethan replied with surprising lightness, more peaceful that way. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of activity. Sarah's department responsibilities included developing curriculum for a new teacher training program, delivering twice-weekly lectures on educational methodology, and supervising student teachers at Wellington's demonstration school. To her relief, Jacob flourished in his new environment. The university school embraced many of the same principles Sarah had implemented at the Mountain Academy, allowing him to advance at his own pace in subjects where he excelled while receiving support in areas needing development. Ethan, contrary to Sarah's private worries, found his own unexpected niche in Wellington. Professor Daniels, learning of his expertise in sustainable building and practical wilderness skills, invited him to offer an elective course for student teachers on environmental education and practical sciences. Told them, "I'm not professor," Ethan reported with bemusement after his first session, said personal experience more valuable than titles. And was it well received? Sarah asked, trying to imagine her reticent husband in a lecture hall. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. 20 students registered, 45 attended. Hope, meanwhile, began walking with determined wobbles, exploring her new world with ferocious curiosity. The walled garden became her kingdom, with Ethan constructing a series of small, safe adventures. Tiny bridges, smooth stepping stones, a miniature cabin just her size. October brought crisp, golden days and the university's Harvest Festival. Jacob's collaboration with Emily had expanded to include 3 other children, their botanical project earning recognition from the science faculty. In a ceremony attended by the entire university, the children presented their findings. Jacob, standing tall and speaking with confidence that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "He's becoming quite the scientist," Eleanor observed as they watched from the audience. "Who would have thought that frightened boy could transform so completely in just a year?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Yet beneath the successful transition to Wellington life, undercurrents of adjustment continued. Sarah occasionally caught Ethan staring toward the distant hills with an expression that tightened her heart. For a man accustomed to wilderness, freedom, the confines of academic society, however welcoming, represented a profound change. "Do you miss it?" she asked one evening, finding him on their back porch, gazing at stars dimmed by the city's lights. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. Sometimes, he admitted, the silence, space, simplicity. Sarah slipped her hand into his. "We could visit during semester breaks," she suggested, "show Hope where she was born." Ethan nodded, but something in his expression remained unsettled. "Not just mountain," he said after a moment. "Miss Purpose." The confession startled her. "But you're teaching," she protested. "Your wilderness course is enormously popular." "Teaching about mountain life," he clarified, struggling to articulate feelings he rarely verbalized. "Not living it. Different." Sarah understood suddenly that while she and Jacob had transferred their essential purposes to Wellington, education, learning, community, Ethan's identity had been more profoundly tied to place. His survival skills, his self-sufficiency, his deep connection to nature, all were diminished in this ordered academic world, despite everyone's best intentions. "What would help?" she asked, practical as always. "What would make Wellington feel more purposeful?" Ethan considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "Not sure yet," he finally admitted. "Still finding way." November brought an unexpected letter from Oakridge, not from Gladys Warren with her regular academy updates, but from Sheriff Davis. Sarah opened it with a flicker of apprehension that turned to shock as she read. "Thomas Harrington has been released," she told Ethan that evening after the children were asleep. "His sentence was commuted for good behavior and overcrowding at the territorial prison." Ethan's body tensed, his instinctive protective instinct asserting itself. "Danger?" Sarah reread the letter carefully. "Davis doesn't think so. He says Harrington has been subdued since his return, keeping to himself mostly." She looked up, meeting Ethan's concerned gaze. "But he thought we should know, especially because of Jacob." "Boy needs truth," Ethan said firmly. But carefully, they decided to tell Jacob together the following day after his return from school. The boy received the news with surprising composure, his initial fear quickly replaced by thoughtful consideration. "He can't hurt us here," Jacob reasoned. "And I'm not the same person he knew. I'm Jacob Ward now, not Jacob Harrington." The pride in his statement, the complete identification with his adopted family, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "That's right," she affirmed. "You're our son in every way that matters." Ethan's hand settled on the boy's shoulder. "Stronger than ye fear," he said simply, "braver than past." Life continued its forward momentum. the Harrington news gradually fading from immediate concern. December arrived with swirling snow and university preparations for winter recess. Sarah found herself unexpectedly occupied with committee work and end-of-term evaluations, often returning home after Hope's bedtime. "You're pushing too hard," Eleanor warned, finding Sarah still working at midnight in her study. "The university won't collapse if you occasionally prioritize yourself." Sarah rubbed her tired eyes. "I just want to prove I belong here," she admitted, "that they didn't make a mistake in appointing me." "Nonsense," Eleanor dismissed. "Your methods are already transforming the teacher training program. Professor Hammond told me applications have doubled for next term's enrollment, specifically citing your innovative curriculum." Despite such reassurances, Sarah felt the weight of expectation, not just from the university, but from herself. She had been given an extraordinary opportunity to influence education beyond a single mountain school. Failure wasn't an option. Ethan noticed her exhaustion but said little, quietly assuming more household responsibilities and ensuring Jacob and Hope received consistent attention despite their mother's demanding schedule. His silent support allowed Sarah to navigate her professional challenges while maintaining family stability, a gift whose value she recognized even in her most overwhelmed moments. The winter holiday finally arrived, bringing blessed relief from academic demands. As Wellington emptied of students and many faculty departed for family visits, the Ward household settled into a quieter rhythm. "We've been invited to Dean Whitcomb's for Christmas dinner," Sarah mentioned as they decorated a modest tree in their parlor. "Emily has apparently been quite insistent that Jacob attend." Ethan and Jacob exchanged knowing glances. At 11, Jacob stood on the cusp of adolescence, his friendship with the brilliant, outspoken Emily evolving in ways that amused both parents. "Could go," Ethan allowed, "or could have our own celebration. First Christmas in new home." The suggestion sparked immediate enthusiasm from Jacob. "Could we invite Aunt Eleanor and Mary, and maybe Emily's family could visit us instead?" Sarah smiled, touched by his desire to establish new traditions while maintaining connections. "That sounds perfect." The days before Christmas brought unexpected gifts: a beautifully carved chess set from Gladys Warren, handmade mittens for Hope from Mrs. Carson, and most surprisingly, a large package from Deputy Fletcher containing professionally preserved specimens of mountain plants labeled in his careful handwriting for Professor Ward's botanical collection. "He remembered," Jacob breathed, carefully examining each specimen, "from our cataloguing project last spring. The mountain's presence, its memories, its people, its continued influence on their lives provided comforting continuity amid Wellington's newness." Sarah realized they hadn't left it behind at all, but carried its essence with them, its lessons integrated into their evolving story. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, the university campus transformed by pristine snow. Hope, now 16 months old and talking in enthusiastic fragments, woke the household with excited babbling about Christmas and peasants. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jacob had crafted gifts for everyone: a botanically accurate painting of mountain wildflowers for Sarah, a precisely whittled whistle for Hope, and for Ethan, a detailed map of a wilderness area north of Wellington, marked with potential exploration routes. "Thought we could go together," he explained shyly as Ethan examined the map. "When spring comes, maybe camp there." Ethan's face lit with genuine pleasure. "Good plan," he approved. "Need wilderness time. Both of us." Sarah watched this exchange with sudden insight. While she had worried about Ethan's adjustment, she had overlooked Jacob's similar need for connection to the natural world they'd left behind. The urban comforts of Wellington, however welcome, couldn't replace certain elemental experiences both father and son required. Her own gift to Ethan addressed this need without her having consciously planned it. Deeds to 40 acres of forested land, an hour's ride from Wellington. "For weekends," she explained, as he studied the papers with surprise. "For teaching Hope about trees and stars, for remembering who we were while becoming who we are." His kiss expressed what words couldn't: gratitude, love, and recognition of how well she understood him, even when he struggled to articulate his needs. Ethan's gift to Sarah revealed similar perception. Inside a simple wooden box lay a medallion, engraved with the Mountain Academy's name and founding date, attached to a beautiful chain. "To remember," he said softly. "Beginning of journey, not end." The wisdom of this perspective struck Sarah forcefully. Wellington wasn't a destination, but another step in their shared path. Not a replacement for the mountain, but an extension of the purpose they'd discovered there. As snow continued falling outside, transforming Wellington into a pristine wonderland, the Ward family welcomed their Christmas guests, Eleanor arriving with armloads of exotic foods, Mary bringing homemade candy, and later the Whitcomb family, including Emily, who immediately engaged Jacob in animated discussion of their holiday. Botanical observations. Watching this gathering, academic and mountain worlds merging seamlessly, Sarah felt a deep sense of rightness. They had created this unlikely family against tremendous odds, and now they were building a community that honored both their past and their future. Ethan appeared beside her, offering a cup of holiday punch. "Happy?" he asked, his simple question layered with meaning. Sarah leaned against his solid warmth. "Complete," she corrected. "We're exactly where we're meant to be." Later that evening, after guests had departed and children slept amid new treasures, Sarah sat with Ethan before the dying fire. Snow whispered against window panes, and distant church bells marked the hour with gentle resonance. "Received letter," Ethan said quietly. "Yesterday." Didn't want to mention during celebrations. Sarah turned to him, immediately alert to his tone. "From Oak Ridge?" He nodded. "Sheriff Davis again, about Harrington." A flicker of unease passed through her. "What's happened?" "Took ill suddenly," Ethan replied. "Pneumonia, not expected to recover." Sarah absorbed this news silently. Thomas Harrington had been their nemesis, the embodiment of ignorance and cruelty they'd fought against. Yet she could summon no satisfaction at his suffering. "Jacob should be told," she said finally. "It's his right to decide how he feels about this," Ethan agreed. "Tomorrow, not tonight." They sat in companionable silence, each lost in reflection as the fire crackled softly. Sarah found her thoughts returning to that first brutal winter in Oak Ridge, her isolation, her struggle for acceptance, her chance encounter with a silent mountain man who'd changed everything. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "what would have happened if you hadn't fixed my roof that day? If we'd never spoken?" Ethan considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "Would have found another way," he decided finally. "Some paths meant to cross." The simple certainty of his response warmed her more than the fire's glow. "Even when the whole town was against me?" "Especially then," he replied, taking her hand in his. "Strength shows clearest against opposition." The new year arrived on a Wednesday, Wellington still wrapped in holiday quiet before the students' return. Jacob absorbed the news of his biological father's condition with solemn thoughtfulness, asking careful questions about pneumonia's progression and requesting time to consider his response. 2 days later, he approached his parents with characteristic determination. "I want to write to him," he announced. "Not because I forgive what he did, but because I want him to know I'm all right, that I found where I belong." Sarah exchanged a glance with Ethan, pride mingling with concern. That's very mature, Jacob. Are you certain it's what you want? The boy nodded, his expression remarkably adult. Professor Whitcomb says closure is important in difficult relationships. This might be my only chance. With Sarah's help, Jacob composed a letter, simple, honest, without bitterness but also without pretense. He wrote of his studies at Wellington, his botanical projects, his adopted family. He expressed hope for his father's recovery, while acknowledging the distance between them might never be bridged. Whether I send it or not, he explained, as he sealed the envelope. Writing it helped me understand something important. I'm not defined by where I came from, but by where I'm going. Sarah hugged him tightly, marveling at the wisdom emerging from this once frightened child. Your father and I are so proud of who you're becoming, she whispered. Jacob smiled, his eyes clear and confident. I know, he said simply. That's what gave me the courage to write this in the first place. The letter was posted the following day. Whether Thomas Harrington would live to read it remained uncertain, but its creation represented a pivotal moment in Jacob's development, recognition of his past without being controlled by it. As January's chill deepened, Wellington University resumed its bustling rhythm. Sarah found herself increasingly comfortable in her role, her initial anxiety about acceptance giving way to confidence in her methods and perspective. Her teacher training approach had been approved for full implementation in the spring term, representing unprecedented influence on the territory's educational future. Ethan, too, had found his footing. His wilderness skills course had expanded to include field expeditions, allowing him regular escapes to more natural settings. Additionally, the university's building committee had consulted him on sustainable design for planned campus expansions, recognizing the value of his practical expertise. Hope thrived in the vibrant household, her vocabulary expanding daily as she absorbed language from academic discussions, Jacob's scientific explanations, and Ethan's concise observations. At 18 months, she demonstrated remarkable determination and curiosity, qualities Sarah recognized from both sides of her. Lineage.February brought news from Oak Ridge. Thomas Harrington had indeed received Jacob's letter before succumbing to pneumonia. Sheriff Davis reported that the man had read it repeatedly during his final days, eventually requesting that it be buried with him. He said nothing, Davis wrote, but those who attended him noted a change in his demeanor after receiving the boy's words, a softening perhaps, a resignation, even some suggest a measure of peace. Jacob received this information with quiet dignity. I'm glad he read it, was all he said. But that evening Sarah found him in the garden, face lifted to the star-scattered sky, eyes shining with unshed tears that seemed to contain both grief and relief in equal measure. By March, winter's grip began to loosen, and with spring's approach came an unexpected letter, this one bearing the territorial governor's seal. Sarah opened it with curiosity that quickly transformed to astonishment. They're establishing a territorial education commission, she told Ethan that evening, to standardize teaching methods throughout the region. The governor has asked me to serve as its chairperson. Ethan studied her reaction carefully. Important position, he observed. Influential. Incredibly so, Sarah agreed, still processing the opportunity's magnitude. It would mean developing standards for every school in the territory, ensuring quality education reaches even the most remote communities, like mountain towns with suspicious residents, Ethan suggested with the ghost of a smile. Sarah laughed softly. Exactly like those. The appointment would require travel, regular visits to schools throughout the territory, meetings with local officials, evaluation of existing educational systems. It would mean time away from Wellington, from her teaching responsibilities, from her family. Challenging, Ethan acknowledged, reading her conflicted thoughts. But important work. Work you're meant for. His certainty steadied her wavering confidence. "You think I should accept?" "Think you already have," he replied with unexpected insight. In heart, just weighing practicalities now, as always, he had distilled the situation to its essence. The opportunity aligned perfectly with Sarah's deepest purpose, not just teaching individual students, but transforming educational approach on a systemic level. The logistical challenges, while significant, were secondary to that core mission. "We would need to reorganize our lives somewhat," she said carefully. "My travel schedule would affect everyone." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Family adapts," he replied. "Jacob nearly grown. Hope has many who love her. I can manage household." The simplicity of his support brought tears to Sarah's eyes. This man, who had once lived in complete isolation, now offered to maintain their family's stability while she pursued work that would take her away from them, a reversal of traditional roles that demonstrated how profoundly they'd both transformed. "The commission meetings would often be held in Carson City," she noted, "near Oak Ridge." Ethan's eyebrows rose slightly as he considered the implications. "Mountain Academy could benefit from your expertise," he suggested. "Regular visits possible." The thought of returning to where their journey began, now in an official capacity that could strengthen and support the school they'd built together, held powerful appeal. The circle would complete itself, from rejected outsider to territorial authority, from improvised classroom to model educational system. That evening, after consulting with Jacob, who exhibited immediate enthusiasm for the prospect of occasional mountain visits, and Eleanor, who offered practical suggestions for managing household and university responsibilities, Sarah composed her acceptance letter. As she wrote, memories cascaded through her mind, the hostile faces of Oak Ridge townspeople, the burning of her cabin, Ethan's unexpected kindness, the first hesitant students arriving at their mountain school, Jacob's evolution from frightened boy to confident young scientist, Hope's birth in the cabin Ethan had built with his own hands. From those unlikely, often painful beginnings had emerged something remarkable, not just a family or a career, but a purpose that now extended throughout the territory. The widowed teacher left to die by town bullies, and the silent mountain man who'd saved her had together created ripples of change that would touch countless lives for generations to come. "Finished?" Ethan asked, finding her still at her desk. Long after the household had quieted for the night, Sarah sealed the envelope, her decision firm and her heart at peace. "Finished," she agreed, rising to join him, "but also just beginning." His smile, once so rare, now a familiar treasure, warmed his weathered face. "Always beginning," he corrected gently, "long as we're together." Hand in hand, they moved through their Wellington home, checking on their sleeping children. Jacob sprawled amid books and botanical sketches. Hope curled like a comma around her favorite stuffed rabbit. Family, purpose, legacy, all flowing from choices made in adversity, from courage maintained against overwhelming odds, from love that had transformed two wounded souls into something greater than themselves. Outside their window, stars glittered above Wellington's darkened campus, the same stars that shone over distant mountains where their journey had begun. Different view, Sarah thought, but same light guiding us forward, always forward together. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them. Out! And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.